Welcome back to another couple of series previews here because there aren't that many teams left. It's time to talk about the conference finals, the Final Four in the NHL, and we're going to be starting out west where we have a rematch of last year's conference finals. The Edmonton Oilers, who are going to start this series on the road, and the Dallas Stars, who find themselves in the conference final for a third straight year. This better not be some old Philadelphia Eagles in like the early 2000s or the Buffalo Bills where it's conference final out, conference final out, conference final out. Could it be? If you were to believe the odds makers, that's what they think is going to happen. Edmonton is a favorite once again for the third straight series. Edmonton is a favorite, and probably for the third straight series, they should be the underdog because once again, when you look at all the variables in this series, so many times when you weigh those balance beams, one leans over to Dallas, next leans over to Dallas, another leans over to Dallas. So we're going to look at some of those factors today. And as far as that series went last year, Edmonton took it in 6 games. And Dallas actually went up 2-1. They won game 3 in Edmonton and didn't win a game the rest of the way. So how's this one going to play out? There are obviously different players to talk about, with one main piece being Mikko Rantanen. Gone are the days where they have to rely on Jason Robertson being their leading point producer come playoff time. Mikko Rantanen obviously had a couple of huge rounds in rounds 1 and 2, slowed down a little bit toward the end of that series. I believe he had 1 assist in the last 3 games, but it didn't matter because when you have a deep team, you can pass that baton to the next line, as you should have to. That's typically what you need. That's typically what you see out of all these Stanley Cup winners. So where am I going to start this one? Up top here, Dallas. This is something I said in the previous series. They have the best depth in the West, guaranteed. When you look at their first line, second line, third line, even got contributions from their fourth line. Sam Steele was the one who tied up that last game, that deciding game 6 against the Winnipeg Jets. They were down 1-0. They got a goal from Sam Steele. They get production pretty much all throughout the lineup. And obviously, when you have Rantanen playing the way he was, it was top heavy towards the end of the first round and the beginning of that second round, and now it looks like maybe the baton's being passed a little as those Finns maybe cool off a little bit. But this is the best depth in the West. The only team that I think rivals them in the entire Stanley Cup playoffs are the Florida Panthers, who, you know, have 3 straight lines who can pass the baton and all beat you at different parts throughout a series. You kind of saw that with teams like the Kings, and Edmonton has been able to deal with those teams pretty well so far. But as far as the depth goes, people will tell you, look at all the contributions from the... Yes, Edmonton has had solid contributions throughout the lineup, but when you look at this Oilers roster, the players that they brought in, that they thought they were going to rely on for depth scoring, Jeff Skinner, Victor Arvidsson, those are 2 30-goal scorers in previous years on different teams. And where were they toward the end of the last series? As the Joker once said, they were at home, washing their tights. They were not even in the lineup. They were healthy scratches. So you look at this roster. Yes, Evander Kane was added after the season ended in the playoffs. Kane's been there the previous years. He never really made a true difference come playoff time. Maybe a couple years back when they made it to the conference final and they played Colorado, but since then, he hasn't been relied upon. Corey Perry, they're getting random contributions, but in no way, shape, or form can you compare that to how reliable the players on the second and third. I mean, the third line of Dallas has Wyatt Johnston, pretty much their leading goal scorer in the playoffs last year, and Jason Robinson, their leading goal scorer from the regular season this year, former 100-point guy. You know, I think he's a scam star, but regardless, to have a scam star on your third line, that's a pretty good thing to have. You got guys like Jamie Benn down in the bottom part of your lineup with a second line of Sagan, Marchment, Duchesne, who you know have good chemistry. This is a great lineup from top to bottom, and it got even better as the playoffs have went on, because if you remember in that first series, no Miro Heiskanen, no Jason Robertson. Now, both of those players came back. Now, they weren't too productive, but you saw as those series went on, especially with Heiskanen, he got more comfortable. He got power play time. He was jumping in on the rush. Now, Robertson, who knows if he'll re-find his form? You all know what I think about him. But having that full lineup intact really can make a difference, because if that top line does go quiet for a little bit, maybe they start this series a little slow, maybe someone like Wyatt Johnston can get off to a hot start and carry the load for a little bit until the top line refines its form. That's how you typically have to have success in the playoffs. You have a fully healthy Dallas team coming into this series, and on the other side, a mostly healthy Edmonton team. And I asterisk that because a player who we didn't even really know was going to be available at any point throughout the playoffs, they said maybe in the Stanley Cup, it looks like Ekholm, their best defensive defenseman, he may be coming back in this series. And you'd like to say, and that's really going to help them out, this is a team that just is coming off back-to-back shutouts without their only true reliable defensive defenseman and a goalie that they had to reinsert because the goalie who was starting for them got injured. You know what I said about these Oilers? It's still the curious case of the Edmonton Oilers, where you have to ask yourself, how are they doing this? They just easily got rid of the Vegas Golden Knights, who are one of the favorites to win the Stanley Cup. They won that division. They were one of the top seeds in the entire West, one of the best records in the entire NHL, lost in 5 games, lost all 3 home games to this Edmonton Oilers team, who was scratching Arvidsson, scratching Skinner, and didn't even get a lot of production from their big 2 players. It's like, how did they do this? They took John Klingberg, a 1% out of 100% rating on the J-Fresh defensive scale. And now all of a sudden he's a stalwart defenseman coming off of a surgery. They trade for Jake Wallman, who was cast off of Detroit and then left out there in San Jose. They just are patching together this roster. 40-year-old Corey Perry. It's truly a mystery, wrapped up in a riddle, wrapped up in an enigma, whatever that saying is. But they clearly do have playoff experience, and they have playoff experience winning a good bit. No Stanley Cup, but you're talking about conference final, second round, Stanley Cup final, now back to the conference final minimum this year. So this is a team who does know how to win. I just mentioned Stuart Skinner coming off back-to-back shutouts. That doesn't really change how anybody feels, nor should it change how anybody feels about the goaltending in this series. It's a clear advantage for Dallas. Dallas has the best remaining goalie in the playoffs with Jake Ottinger. So they clearly have the best depth. They clearly have the best goaltending. They have home ice advantage. So much is going right for Dallas currently in this moment as they head into this series. Now, what does Edmonton have to rely on? What can they look at and say, oh, well, they can rely on the fact that they've won, 8 of their last 9 games and are on fire and are coming into this series pretty rested, considering they wrapped up that last one. Let me tell you the craziest thing about Edmonton. We know for a fact at some point that power play is going to explode. How wild is it that they just won that last game, that's last series in 5, having to switch the goalie like we talked about and go back to a Skinner who got destroyed against the Kings. Didn't get a lot of production from Draisaitl or McDavid, and went about 5% on their power play and won the series in 5. I'm telling you, the curious case of the Edmonton Oilers. But the one thing that's not curious is something that I have said to you guys, the formula recently with Stanley Cup champions and Stanley Cup winners is you see them nibbling. And in that nibbling process, conference final against the Avalanche lost to the Stanley Cup champions. Next year, second round, lost to the Vegas Golden Knights, Stanley Cup champions. Next year, they make it to the Stanley Cup final, lose to the Stanley Cup champions. This team legitimately only loses to Stanley Cup caliber competition. And when you're looking across the ice from them, ever since they traded for Mikko Rantanen, the odds-on favorite to win the Stanley Cup was the Dallas Stars. Now, that changed a little before the playoffs because of the big losing streak that they were on, and no Heiskanen and Robertson. That kind of changed. But before that, the consensus odds-on favorite to win the Stanley Cup was the Dallas Stars, and they looked primed to be in a position to do so. So who am I going to pick in this series? Well, I watched this series very closely last series. I picked the Dallas Stars to win the series. They got up to a 2-0 lead. They outplayed the Oilers in Game 6, ended up losing the series. In that series, do you want to know what decided it? The Dallas Stars scored 0 power play goals. No, not 2 or 3, 0 power play goals. Edmonton started cold, but then once they warmed up, they didn't lose a game the rest of the way. You can't concede power play goals while not scoring power play goals. And I want to say, in order for Dallas to win, they're going to need a couple power play goals. Guess what? That's what I thought for the Kings. The Kings had the best power play in the entire playoffs, and it still wasn't enough. Now, should they have won that series? Yes. Should they have closed out those games 3 and 4? Yes. But I almost feel like, okay, we can get that recipe again. Dallas can score a couple of goals because their power play has been great in the playoffs. And Edmonton, they could match Edmonton in power play goals and still somehow lose the series because Edmonton has weirdly proved they can win series in a multitude of ways, which, once again, is a sign of a team that's ready to win the Stanley Cup. They're passing all the little checkpoints along the way. This is a team that truly, it feels like it was Stanley Cup or bust. What you're really learning in this series, by the way, pay zero attention to that last week or two of the season when a team has Stanley Cup aspirations. Okay, Edmonton is stumbling down the stretch. They're resting all their best players. Yeah, it's because they want to win the Stanley Cup. And winning that random game 81 against Vancouver isn't worth pushing those guys. Now, not only did they get rest at the end of the year, they just closed that last series in 5. You're going to get a pretty rested, fresh Edmonton team coming into this series. Same kind of thing with Dallas, by the way. When their guys were relatively injured, they rested them for extended periods of time. So this series has the makings, I want to say, of a great one. But this monkey wrench of an Edmonton Oilers team has shown they can win this series in 5. By the way, they've won 8 out of 9 games in the Western Conference, which is not easy whatsoever. They didn't have any layup opponents. They were on the road in both of these series, which is why, despite Dallas having the edge in almost everything, except maybe the Conn Smythe favorite, McDavid versus Rantanen, those are the 2 Conn Smythe favorites right now. Obviously, you're going to edge McDavid when it comes to, who's going to show up more in this series. I mean, I'll look for that. I'll look for the McDavid versus Rantanen head-to-head points, but something tells me the price ain't going to be too solid on that one. I did not see that before I made this video, but just like I said in the previous 2 series, everything I love in a team, Dallas Stars have. I'm taking the Edmonton Oilers. No. See, you're not allowed to get mad at me because now I know a decent amount of you are taking the Oilers. You're hopping on my bandwagon. But, I knew. I sniffed 3 sniffs ahead. I knew it wasn't a death sentence for a team that's been there, done that. The same way the Florida Panthers, everyone kind of wrote them off before they played the Lightning, won that in 5. We'll see if they get to this conference final later on. But I'm going with Edmonton to defeat the Dallas Stars and make it to the Stanley Cup final for the 2nd straight year. The same way we saw Florida Panthers make it to the Stanley Cup final a 2nd straight year. Are they going to get over the top? Well, maybe for me, that kind of depends who they play in that Stanley Cup final. Wink, wink. But as far as the Stanley Cup final goes, there has to be a Conn Smythe winner. I have a scam that I'm preparing for this series. If you missed out on the opportunity to get McDavid for Conn Smythe when they were down 2-0 to the LA Kings, or you didn't take Mikko Rantanen around Game 4 when that series was tied at 2 and he had like 1 point in the entire series, and you didn't get a good price on him, here's what I'm doing. Assuming the price is even relatively nice on that player who's now trailing in the series because the odds are going to update it after every game, you take that player for Conn Smythe. That's your way of taking that team to win the Stanley Cup. So if I said, hey, I think the Dallas Stars are going to win the Stanley Cup when they're down 0-1 in the series or something like that, don't take the Dallas Stars. I'm going right back to what I told you last year. I'm just doing it 1 round ahead. Take Mikko Rantanen to win Conn Smythe. You do the same exact thing with Connor McDavid if they're down 0-1. If they don't move it because they're too smart, but if the series is 2-1, now they'll start giving you some better prices. I am getting Rantanen and McDavid. Now, I have a lot of McDavid already, but if the Oilers are up 1-0, 2-0, 2-1, That's what I'm going to take Rantanen to win the Conn Smythe, to have that covered. It's like having Dallas to win the Stanley Cup at a great price. That's what I look at Rantanen. It's almost guaranteed. I mean, having back-to-back hat tricks and all those stats. I know Ottinger's played great. We could kind of figure that out along the way as well. But I'm looking to get McDavid and Rantanen, depending on who goes down at what point, by how many games, at fantastic prices throughout the course of this series. So that's one thing on my mind. I haven't just sorted out how I'm going to do it yet. But keep in mind, I already have a good amount of plus 2,000, 2,500 McDavid from that first round. You know me and Connor McDavid, Conn Smythe. So they're near and dear to my heart, and they always will be. So after that, I saw in the series points, I mean, when you look at Connor McDavid, I think they set his over-under at 9.5. When he's on the score sheet, there's almost a 50% chance Evan Bouchard's going to be on that score sheet with him, whether it's on the power play. He seems to always be on the ice with him at even strength as well. So I will take the over 5.5 points for Evan Bouchard. It's minus 105, so not too much juice on something like that. That's just going to depend on this series going more than 5 games, because I think he had 5 points in the last series, but if that series goes 6 games, 7 games, you know he's getting there. So the only thing that would screw that, in my opinion, is if this series ends in 5 or fewer games. But I don't think that's going to happen, because the result that I like in this series, if you're asking me to pick, I think it's going to end like last year. I think this series is going to end 4-2 Edmonton, with the series ending in Edmonton just as it did last year. The parallels for the Stars are pretty insane. They win round 1 in game 7, just as they did the previous year. They win round 2 in 6 games in overtime, just like they did last year. And now they're facing these Edmonton Oilers once again, and I believe they're going to lose in 6, unfortunately. I think they're going to have that Philadelphia Eagles, whenever it was, like 2000, 2001, 2002, or it was 01, 02, 03. 3 straight Western Conference losses in a row. That sucks. And a lot of it, it's not so much because of them. These are really, really tough matchups. This Edmonton team has just caught one of these tailwinds. We will see, because Dallas, they lost in the conference final to Vegas 2 years ago, and then, they got that one back last year. So maybe they'll try to get that one back against Edmonton. But many times in the playoffs, as you saw with Dallas and Colorado, as you saw with Florida and Tampa, sometimes when you play a team in back-to-back years, that mental edge that they have over you, knowing they beat you 1 year ago, that they kind of have your number, you see that kind of roll over. I mean, Oilers and the Kings, and I think they're going to repeat and do the same thing. I'm taking the Oilers to win this series in 6 games. And that's what I have for you here on this series preview. One last deep sniff. I mean, I hit it in the Carolina series, so you know the formula. Leading goal scorer. You're looking for guys who are on that top power play. Doesn't necessarily have to be the top line, as long as he's on a line that can produce and is also on that top power play that gives him the maximum chance to score a bunch of goals. You ideally kind of want him to be out there for some empty net situations as well. I'm looking, who am I seeing over plus 1,000? Really, there's just one prime suspect here for me. I mean, you could go Matt Duchene if you value those empty netters, and he is on the top power play. That's a big price. All right, let's do a little half sniff on Matt Duchene. But really, Wyatt Johnston coming in at plus 1,100, plus 1,200 as far as leading goal scorer. Yeah, I kind of like him outside those big guys. Yeah, there's the Rantanens and the Draisaitls, but if you're asking me for somewhat of a deep sniff that's not too deep, like Svechnikov shouldn't be considered a deep sniff, and we hit that plus 1,500 last round. So let's see if we can hit this plus 1,200 this round with Wyatt Johnston. That's what I have for you for this Western Conference Series preview. Hope you enjoyed it. As I like to say at the end of my videos, good luck to you, regardless of who you've taken in this series. Better luck to me. Make sure you're subscribed here to my YouTube channel if you like this series preview, you like other series preview, you like the daily sniffs, you like anything and everything that's here. Show your appreciation. Tossing me a click the like, comment something down below. Make sure you're subscribed. Click the notifications. All of them help. It kicks this stuff up the algorithm. And you know, like I put that Gypsy Stephen King's thinner curse on you. If you don't do any of that, then I'm putting the curse that you get sports betting bad luck. Here it is. Oh yeah, actually let me put in that code. These dirtbag gargoyles, if they don't give me clicks, then they will have awful luck. That's it. You're screwed if you don't give me the clicks on this video. Also, you want to do even more than that? You can bypass all those clicks if you give me the biggest click of all, and that's joining the Patreon. It's patreon.com/AndyFrancis. That's where you'll get Josh's baseball picks, by the way. He's been putting the IIHF picks as well for, you know, the Worlds. So you can get that over there. That's where I'll add additional sniffs for the games after some new information is learned throughout the day or players are added to the pool. And that's where you can talk to the community of sniffers in the chat rooms and see their 27 legs parlay. The legs keep going up. When the sports books add more like they allow, it used to be 20 leg max, now it's 25 leg max. They're putting in 25 leg parlays. I hope to see yours over there. If not, I'll see you for the next series preview. I look forward to it, and I will talk to you then.